Have you ever thought about those moments in history that are just complete game changers? You know, 1 second, things are going one way, and then boom, a single decision changes everything. Well, today we're diving into one of those moments, the wild story of Christopher Columbus and the absolutely monumental year of 1492. So let's set the scene. The year is 1492, and this guy, Christopher Columbus, an Italian mapmaker, has just walked out of the royal court of Spain's King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. He's got this idea, this really radical, really expensive idea, that he can reach Asia by sailing west straight across the Atlantic. Most of the experts, they thought he was nuts. And yeah, just as everyone expected, the Spanish monarchs told him no. So there he is, riding away, probably feeling totally crushed. I mean, his dream of finding a new trade route is pretty much in the gutter. And this isn't the first time he's heard no. The kings of Portugal, England, and France, they all turned him down too. He's 40 years old, he's out of options, and he's probably thinking it's time to just pack it in. But then, something straight out of a movie happens. He's just a few miles down the road when he hears galloping hoofbeats behind him. It's a royal messenger, shouting for him to turn around and come back. In this absolutely stunning reversal, the king and queen have changed their minds. They're gonna fund his voyage after all. And this, right here, is the big mystery we're gonna solve today. What on earth happened in that short amount of time? Why did they suddenly say yes to this risky plan that they had just rejected? To find the answer, we have to dig deep into the worldview of 15th century Spain. So let's start with the most basic thing, the land itself. If you really want to understand Spain's decision, you first have to get a handle on its unique and, honestly, super powerful place in the world. You know, there's this old saying in Spain, La Geografía Manda, which basically means geography controls everything. And for Spain, believe me, this couldn't have been more true. Their entire history, their identity, it was all shaped by where they were on the map. Just look at it here. Spain is literally a crossroads. It's the bridge connecting Africa to Europe, and at the same time, it's staring right out into the huge, unknown Atlantic Ocean. For hundreds and hundreds of years, this spot made Spain a hotbed for trade, for new ideas, and for almost constant war. And that constant conflict, that's the next massive piece of our puzzle. For nearly 800 years, Spain was home to a struggle that would define everything about it, its religion, its people, and its ambitions for the future. So it all kicked off way back in the year 711. A Muslim army crossed over from North Africa and conquered almost the entire Iberian Peninsula. This created a whole new, incredibly multicultural society called Al-Andalus, or Muslim Spain. Now, don't for a second think this was some kind of backwater. No way. Muslim Spain was this vibrant, incredible center of art, architecture, and learning. Just look at the Alhambra Palace in Granada. It's an absolute masterpiece that shows you just how much this society valued beauty and knowledge. The cities in Muslim Spain were like beacons of learning. You had brilliant scholars like the Muslim philosopher Ibn Rushd and the Jewish thinker Maimonides, both working and thriving there. They were studying science, medicine, philosophy. They even preserved all the ancient Greek knowledge that had been totally lost in the rest of Christian Europe. It was a place where intellectual life just exploded. But for the Christian kingdoms that were still holding on in the north of Spain, this was their land, and they wanted it back. They called their centuries-long struggle the Reconquista, which literally means reconquest. And this wasn't just a war over territory. For them, it was a holy crusade, and it became the single most important thing shaping the Spanish worldview for generations. And the Reconquista was a real slow burn. It was this grinding, multi-generational effort. You can see on the timeline, they'd have these key victories, like taking the city of Toledo in 1085, slowly pushing south. But the event that really changes the game for our story happens in 1469, the marriage of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. Their marriage finally created a unified Spain, ready to make one last massive push. Okay, so this is it. This is the moment where all these different threads, the geography, the religion, the centuries of war, they all come crashing together in one single world-changing year. 1492. If you remember one single date from all of this, make it this one. It is, without a doubt, one of the most important years in the history of Spain, and maybe even the world. It's a moment when absolutely everything changes. Just look at these dates.
On January 2nd, Ferdinand and Isabella's army finally conquers Granada, the very last Muslim kingdom in Spain. The 800-year-long Reconquista is officially over. And then, just 3 months later, in April, they say yes to Columbus. See the connection? The timing is just incredible.
One massive, centuries-long national project ends, and almost without skipping a beat, a brand new one begins. So let's finally directly answer that big question. Why, after all those rejections, did the Spanish monarchs suddenly decide to roll the dice and fund this incredibly risky voyage across the ocean? Well, because in 1492, the entire situation was different. The war was done, the kingdom was unified, and finally had the money and the attention span to look outward. Plus, Ferdinand and Isabella were riding high on this victory. Filled with this powerful sense of religious destiny, they wanted to spread Christianity around the globe. And they were in a fierce competition with their neighbor, Portugal, who was already out there exploring new sea routes. All of a sudden, Columbus's crazy plan didn't seem like a distraction anymore. It looked like a golden opportunity. Basically, you can think of it like this. All of that intense energy, that ambition, and that religious passion that Spain had focused inward for 800 years, it was suddenly unleashed. With their home finally secure, Ferdinand and Isabella just aimed all of that energy outward, across the Atlantic. And just like that, the age of exploration and empire had begun.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought. We've seen how Spain's unique history, its geography, and its deeply held beliefs all came together to launch it on this new, world-changing path. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is it about a society's worldview, the stories it tells itself, the struggles it overcomes, its sense of destiny, that can lead it to want to go out and build an empire? It's a huge question, and one that we see pop up again and again throughout history.
In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
The classic.
It's the rhyme that launched a million history lessons. It's sticky, it's simple, and if you're, staring down a classroom of 38th graders, it's also completely insufficient.
It's a bit of a trap, isn't it?
Yeah.
It reduces this huge moment in history to just a guy on a boat trip. You miss all the tension.
Exactly. And that is why we're here today. Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a stack of sources here, maps, accounts from the Spanish court, economic analyses, and our mission is to help you prep the ultimate lesson plan on Spain's worldview in 1492.
Because the ships, that's not where you start.
No, the ships are the boring part.
Right. By the time he gets on the boat, the real drama is kind of over.
You have to start with the failure. You have to start with this 40-year-old man, humiliated, broke, riding a mule out of town because the king and queen just told him to get lost.
That's the hook. The mule moment. Because understanding why that mule turned around, why a resounding no became a desperate yes, that's the key to everything.
So let's get into it. We're looking at the psychology of a whole nation here. We need to explain to your... And looking at the research, it seems like we can boil this down to 3 big pressure points.
Geography, God, and gold.
The 3 Gs.
But probably not in the way you learn them in school. It's deeper than just greed.
Okay, let's start with the first one. The source material frames this with a fantastic Spanish phrase. If there's one thing I want the listeners to, put on the whiteboard for their students, it's this. La Geografía Manda.
Geography controls everything. It's a pretty deterministic view, but for Spain, it's really hard to argue against.
Yeah.
The sources make this great comparison between Italy and Spain, just to show how location is destiny.
Right, the map comparison. I love this. So if you look at Italy during the Renaissance, where is all its attention focused?
East. It has to be. Italy is dangling right in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's like gravity.
The Silk Road, the spice trade.
The connection to Asia, that's where all the money was.
Yeah.
So Italy is psychologically and economically pulled east. They didn't need the Atlantic. They had a super highway right at their doorstep.
But Spain, the text describes Spain as jutting out like a bull's head.
It's such a vivid image. Spain is physically pushing away from the Mediterranean and just thrusting itself into the Atlantic.
So for centuries, you have Spaniards standing on the cliffs, just staring at this massive, churning ocean, the ocean sea.
And unlike the Italians, they don't see trade routes. They see a wall.
Or an abyss.
Or a mystery. La Geografía Manda. It dictates that if Spain wants to expand, the only way is west. They are literally at the edge of the known world. That shapes a national character.
It creates a kind of hardness.
A hardness, a curiosity, absolutely. But there's another geographical element here that the sources highlight, which bridges us perfectly to the next topic.
Right, it isn't just touching the Atlantic.
It's almost touching Africa. The Strait of Gibraltar is tiny. You can see across it on a clear day.
And that proximity meant Spain wasn't just another European country, it was a frontier zone.
It was the collision point
Yeah.
between Christendom and the Islamic world.
Which brings us to the second and arguably most intense pillar of the Spanish worldview, religion.
The Reconquista.
And for a grade 8 class, I think this is where you have to be so careful not to just list dates, you have to paint the picture.
Absolutely. You have to rewind the clock. Way back, we're talking 711 AD. A Muslim force crosses that narrow strait we just talked about.
Tariq ibn Ziyad.
Right. And they don't just raid, they conquer. For hundreds and hundreds of years, almost the entire Iberian Peninsula, what is now Spain and Portugal, was a place called Al-Andalus.
And Al-Andalus, the sources are really specific about this. It wasn't some backwater. While the rest of Europe was in the so-called Dark Ages, Al-Andalus had streetlights.
They had running water. It was the intellectual light of the West. The Great Mosque of Cordoba. The libraries. I mean, the sources point out the first university in the world wasn't Oxford or Paris. It was in Cairo, which reflects that Islamic focus on knowledge.
And in Spain, you had this incredible period of coexistence, the kind of vivencia.
Muslim, Jewish, and Christian scholars working together, translating Aristotle, advancing medicine. It was a high watermark for culture.
Sounds almost utopian.
It was. But for the Christian kingdoms that were pinned up in the north of Spain, it wasn't a cultural exchange. It was an occupation.
And that's the seed of the Reconquista, the Reconquest.
This wasn't a quick war. This was a multi-generational, centuries-long crusade. It defined their entire existence.
So if you're born in a Christian kingdom in Spain between, say, 800 and 1400?
Your societal purpose is to fight the infidel and take back the land. It breeds a very specific type of person. Militant, hyper-religious, and just obsessed with unity.
And all of this comes to a head on January 2nd, 1492.
Yes.
We always think of October, the ships, but January is arguably more important for the Spanish mindset.
The fall of Granada. The last Muslim stronghold finally surrenders. Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs, ride into the city. After 700 years, the war is over.
Wow. I mean, can you imagine the atmosphere in the court? It must have been electric. They must have felt invincible.
Invincible and divinely chosen. They believe God had handed them this victory. But, and this is the key nuance for the students, victory brings paranoia. When you've spent 700 years fighting an other inside your own borders, you become obsessed with purity. You don't just want political control.
You want thought control.
Exactly. Enter the Inquisition.
A state weapon.
A state weapon. Ferdinand and Isabella used it to root out anyone who wasn't a true believer. It was a terror mechanism to enforce unity.
Which leads to the decision that, just economically speaking, I find baffling. That same year, 1492, they issued the Decree of Expulsion.
An ultimatum. For the Jewish and Muslim populations, convert to Catholicism or get out.
And you can't take your wealth.
Nothing. The sources describe these heartbreaking scenes. Families selling a beautiful home for a donkey, a vineyard for a piece of cloth.
It's just a fire sale of human lives.
It was ethnic cleansing. But think about the cause and effect, which is perfect for a lesson on critical thinking. Who were the Jews and Muslims in Al-Andalus?
They were the middle class, the doctors, the financiers, the artisans.
The tax collectors. The machinery of the state and economy was run largely by these minority groups. So by kicking them out, Spain achieves its religious unity, but they commit economic suicide.
A classic brain drain.
On a massive scale. So now picture the scene. It's mid-1492. Ferdinand and Isabella are in their new palace in Granada. They have the glory, they have God on their side. But they have a massive problem.
They're broke.
Destitute. That war drained the treasury. And they've just kicked out the people who actually knew how to make money.
This brings us to the third pillar, gold. And we have to talk about the hidalgos.
The hidalgos, yes. This is a term that students usually find fascinating. It translates to son of something. These are the lower nobility.
I always picture them like characters in a role-playing game. You know, high stats in fighting, 0 stats in commerce.
That is actually the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The hidalgo had a title. He had honor. He had a sword. But he had no land.
And crucially, he was forbidden from working.
Socially and culturally, yeah. Manual labor, trade, that was seen as dirty. A noble does not handle money. a noble handles a sword. If a hidalgo opened a bakery, he'd lose his status.
So you have a whole class of people who are trained to kill, have no money, and refuse to get a job.
And for centuries, their job was the Reconquista. Go south, fight the Moors, plunder a village, get a cut of the loot. That was their economy.
But the war is over now. Granada has fallen.
Exactly. So suddenly you have thousands of armed, adrenaline-filled, broke young men with nothing to do. That is a recipe for civil war.
Ferdinand and Isabella had to know this.
Oh, they knew. They had a domestic crisis on their hands. They needed a pressure valve.
A new frontier.
They needed somewhere to send these guys.
Yeah.
And they needed gold to refill the treasury.
So when Columbus shows up, the guy on the mule, and says, I can get you to the east by going west, and I promise you mountains of gold.
He's not just offering a trade route. He's offering a bailout.
A solution to their unemployment crisis and their debt crisis.
All at once. It explains why they took the risk. I mean, everyone knew Columbus's math was wrong about the size of the Earth. The experts told the Queen, he is wrong. The ocean is too big. He'll die.
But desperation changes the risk calculus.
Precisely. If he dies, they lose 3 small, cheap ships. But if he's right, or if he just finds anything of value, it saves the kingdom.
And his letters back, they show that obsession with gold. It wasn't just greed, it was survival. They were almost desperate in their exaggeration.
Oh, they're marketing brochures.
Yeah.
He finds a few indigenous people with nose rings and writes back, the rivers are teeming with gold. He knew his audience.
Right.
He knew that as long as he promised wealth, the hidalgos would keep coming and the crown would keep funding him.
But we can't separate the gold from the religion. The readings were really interesting on this point. It wasn't just, I want money. It was, I want money to serve God.
It's the concept of the militant missionary. The Spanish saw no contradiction between conquering people, taking their stuff, and saving their souls.
Right.
In their worldview, the gold was necessary to fund the defense of the church, and the conquest was necessary to bring the heathen into the fold.
It's the 3 Gs again. God, gold, and glory, all wrapped up in one very violent package.
And that violence brings us to the final part of the lesson plan, which might be the most critical, the propaganda war.
Right, because how we remember these guys, the conquistadors, is so heavily influenced by who was writing the history books.
And the sources introduce a fascinating character here. Bartolomé de las Casas.
The whistleblower.
The whistleblower.
Yeah.
He was a Spanish priest. He went to the Americas. He owned land. He owned slaves at first. But he had this huge crisis of conscience. He saw the brutality of the hidalgos against the indigenous people, and he was horrified.
So he writes this book, a short account of the destruction of the Indies, and it is graphic.
It's gruesome. But his intent is crucial. He wasn't trying to destroy Spain. He was writing to the King of Spain. He was basically saying, Your Majesties, look at these sins being committed in your name. We are Christians. We have to stop this.
He wanted reform.
That's all. But that is not what happened.
No, the book got out.
And who picked it up? England, France, the Netherlands.
Spain's enemies.
And they did not care about the indigenous people. They cared about making Spain look bad.
This was the birth of the Black Legend.
Exactly. These rival powers took de las Casas' internal critique, they translated, they added these horrific illustrations, often by artists who had never even been to the Americas. And they spread it everywhere.
It's like 16th century fake news, or weaponized truth.
Weaponized truth is the perfect way to put it. The English and French narrative became, look at these monstrous, bloodthirsty Spaniards. They are uniquely evil. Therefore, when we go to the Americas,
I'll be the good guys.
We'll be the liberators. It was pure hypocrisy, but it worked. It allowed other European powers to justify their own empire building under this, guise of moral superiority.
This is such a powerful lesson for students on sourcing. You have to ask, who's telling the story and why?
Yeah. De las Casas told the truth to save souls. The English used that truth to steal land. It teaches that history isn't just about what happened. It's about how it was packaged and sold.
So we have covered a lot of ground. If we're sending our listener back into the classroom, how do we synthesize this? What's the cheat sheet?
I think you break it down into a simple equation. You can't get 1492 without these 3 variables.
Okay, variable 1.
Geography. Spain is a bull's head facing the Atlantic, La Geografía Manda. Their location forced them to look west and put them on the front line with Islam.
Variable 2.
Radical unity. The Reconquista created a society that was militant, hyper-religious, and intolerant. The victory in Granada gave them confidence, but the Inquisition showed their deep-seated fear. They needed to expand their faith to validate who they were.
And variable 3.
Economic desperation. The war left the state bankrupt. The expulsion of the Jews and Muslims shattered the middle class, and the social structure left thousands of hidalgos, these nobles who couldn't work, needing a new war to fight.
So you put those together, a nation facing the ocean, believing they are God's chosen warriors, and just desperate for cash.
And suddenly, saying yes to the crazy guy on the mule isn't a whim. It's the only logical move left on the board.
It makes a history feel so much more inevitable.
It moves us away from the great man theory of history, where Columbus is some lone genius and shows us the waves of pressure that were pushing him forward.
Before we wrap up, I want to go back to that phrase one last time. La Geografía Manda. Geography controls everything. We've established it was true for Spain in 1492, but does it still hold up?
That's the big question for the students, isn't it?
Yeah.
We like to think we've conquered geography, we have the internet, we have airplanes, we feel like we live in a placeless world.
But do we really?
I don't think so. Look at geopolitics. Why are certain countries rich and others poor? It's often about access to ports, or rivers, or natural resources, even in our personal lives. If you grow up in a valley surrounded by mountains versus a port city, your horizon is different, your job prospects are different.
It's funny, we spend so much time on our phones, we forget we're actually standing on dirt.
We're biological creatures in a physical space. We can ignore geography, but it doesn't ignore us. It still shapes who we meet, what we eat, and what we fear.
That is a bit of an existential crisis to end a history lesson with.
But I think the grade 8s can handle it.
I think they'll love it. It makes the map on the wall feel a lot more relevant.
For sure.
All right. To our listener, you have your mission. Forget the rhyme. Tell them about the mule. Tell them about the broke nobles who refused to bake bread. Tell them about the PR war. And watch them realize that 1492 was about a lot more than just the ocean blue.
Good luck.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you on the next one.